Join me as we take a deep dive into one of the most talked about and emotionally charged religious disputes to unfold in the digital age. What began as a disagreement rooted in scripture has evolved into a public confrontation that now sits at the intersection of faith, influence, personality, and platform power. The dispute between Pastor Gino Jennings and Sir Walter Jones has captured widespread attention, not only because of who they are, but because of what they represent within modern religious discourse. Pastor Gino Jennings is known across the world for his uncompromising delivery and unwavering commitment to what he teaches as biblical truth. His sermons are direct, often confrontational, and grounded in a strict interpretation of Scripture. For decades, he has built a global following through consistency, discipline, and a refusal to soften his message to fit cultural trends. To his supporters, he represents clarity in a world of confusion. To his critics, he represents rigidity and resistance to change. Sir Walter Jones occupies a different space. His presence is rooted in high-energy commentary, emotional transparency, and a style that blends spiritual discussion with modern media performance. He has cultivated a loyal following by positioning himself as someone willing to challenge authority, question tradition, and speak openly about issues others may avoid. His supporters see him as bold and authentic. His critics see him as confrontational and theatrical. For a time, these two figures existed within the same broader religious ecosystem without direct conflict. Their teachings, though different, occupied parallel lanes. But as online discussions grew louder and audiences more interconnected, those lanes began to merge. Subtle disagreements turned into direct critiques and eventually into a full-scale public dispute. At the heart of this conflict are deep theological differences. One of the most prominent points of contention involves the role of women in the church. Pastor Jennings maintains a traditional interpretation that places firm limits on women's leadership roles within religious institutions. He teaches that these boundaries are not cultural preferences, but scriptural mandates. Sir Walter Jones, however, has challenged this interpretation, arguing that such views restrict spiritual growth and fail to account for broader biblical context. This disagreement alone has sparked intense debate across religious communities. Beyond that, the two differ significantly in their views on salvation, spiritual authority, and the process through which individuals come to understand and live out their faith. Pastor Jennings emphasizes order, structure, and adherence to what he defines as core biblical principles. Sir Walter emphasizes personal growth, lived experience, and what he describes as accountability within leadership. These differences are not merely academic. They touch on identity, purpose, and how faith is practiced in everyday life. As discussions intensified, the tone of the exchanges began to shift. What initially appeared to be a theological disagreement gradually took on a more personal edge. Sir Walter's commentary became more direct and emotionally charged. His broadcasts increasingly moved beyond doctrine and into critiques of character, leadership style, and perceived inconsistencies. Viewers began to sense that this was no longer just a debate about scripture, but a confrontation shaped by frustration and conviction. The escalation reached a point where personal details were brought into the public conversation. Family dynamics, personal history, and private circumstances were referenced in ways that shocked some viewers and energized others. For many watching live, it became clear that the stakes had changed. This was no longer simply about who was right or wrong theologically. It was about credibility, influence, and personal boundaries in public discourse. Reactions were immediate and intense. Live chat feeds filled with conflicting responses, some applauding the unfiltered approach, others expressing discomfort at how personal the confrontation had become. The audience was no longer passive. They were emotionally invested, dissecting every statement, every pause, every shift in tone. Clips began circulating rapidly across social media platforms, reaching audiences far beyond the original broadcasts. As the situation unfolded, another figure emerged as a central presence in shaping how the feud was understood: Social Fire. Rather than engaging emotionally, Social Fire approached the conflict with an investigative mindset. Every statement, every visual detail, and every reaction was carefully documented. Streams were clipped, timelines reconstructed, and patterns analyzed. The goal was not to inflame the situation, but to contextualize it. Social Fire examined not only what was being said, but how it was being presented. Studio setups, production quality, and visual symbolism became part of the analysis. Viewers were introduced to a layered breakdown of influence, where presentation and messaging were shown to play a critical role in shaping audience perception. This approach resonated with many who were trying to make sense of the rapidly escalating conflict. One of the most talked about moments came when Sir Walter openly showcased his professional studio environment. The reveal of high-end equipment, polished lighting, and carefully curated aesthetics became a focal point of discussion. To some, it demonstrated seriousness, commitment, and investment in his platform. To others, it raised questions about spectacle and authority. Regardless of interpretation, the moment went viral. Social Fire incorporated these visuals into his broader narrative, emphasizing that modern religious discourse does not exist in a vacuum. It is influenced by branding, presentation, and the expectations of digital audiences. These clips spread rapidly, spawning reaction videos, debates, and commentary across multiple platforms. What had once been a niche disagreement now became a widespread online event. The conflict took yet another unexpected turn when music entered the conversation. References to well-known songs, musical performances, and recurring motifs became part of the ongoing exchanges. These moments added a performative layer that blurred the line between debate and entertainment. Viewers began to analyze not just the words, but the symbolism behind each choice. As the feud gained momentum, other content creators began weighing in. Religious commentators, reaction channels, and independent analysts offered their perspectives. Some aligned with Pastor Jennings, praising his restraint and commitment to Scripture. Others supported Sir Walter, viewing his approach as necessary confrontation in a space that often avoids accountability. This secondary wave of engagement expanded the reach of the dispute even further. Hashtags trend. Short clips flooded social media feeds. Comment sections became forums for theological debate, personal opinion, and cultural reflection. Many viewers who had never followed either figure found themselves drawn in, not because of religious alignment, but because of the human drama unfolding in real time. Despite the intensity surrounding the situation, a quieter moment eventually arrived when Pastor Gino Jennings addressed the matter directly. His response was measured and deliberate. Rather than engaging in personal critique, he emphasized unity, humility, and a return to Scripture. He framed the dispute as a reminder of the importance of maintaining spiritual discipline, even in disagreement. Pastor Jennings spoke about the need for dialogue rooted in respect and understanding. He acknowledged differences in interpretation, but stressed that public conflict should not undermine the broader mission of faith communities. His approach stood in contrast to the emotional volatility surrounding the feud, offering a different model for handling public disagreement. This moment prompted reflection among viewers. Some saw it as an attempt to de-escalate. Others viewed it as avoidance. But for many, it highlighted a fundamental difference in how the two leaders navigate conflict. One leaned toward restraint and tradition. The other leaned toward confrontation and exposure. Ultimately, this dispute represents something larger than any single disagreement. It reflects a broader conversation taking place within religious communities about tradition versus progress, authority versus accountability, and how faith is communicated in a digital age. It raises difficult questions about leadership, influence, and the responsibilities that come with large platforms. As millions continue to watch, the situation remains unresolved. What happens next is uncertain. But what is clear is that this conflict has already left a lasting impact. It has challenged audiences to think critically about how disagreements are handled, how power operates online, and how faith is shaped by the mediums through which it is expressed. This is not just a story about two men. It is a story about belief, identity, and the evolving nature of religious discourse in a connected world. And as the conversation continues, so too does the opportunity for reflection, understanding, and, perhaps, growth. Thanks for the watching and subscribe.